and we at the labs, our focus is to bring some of the most innovative minds in education to educators across India so that you can get that spark, you can create your own ideas, you can innovate and reinvent learning in your own spaces. So I'm very excited to introduce this idea to you with these people. Because it is also really close to my heart. I personally believe that we are born philosophers, and it is in fact that which leads to every other field of knowledge and information. And in fact, philosophy is imagination, philosophy is creativity, philosophy is analysis, critical thinking, and reflection. It is every skill that human beings hold true and central to humanity. And so it is really surprising that philosophizing with children is something that we have to discuss as an innovation as opposed to it being absolutely and completely mainstream. Yeah, so with that, I want to welcome Jana, who is the director and co-founder of PLATO, which is philosophy learning and teaching organization, and for many years was the director for the Center for Philosophy for Children. She's been leading philosophy classes with students from preschool to graduate school for more than 25 years. She's worked with educators, administrators, and families around the US and beyond. She's also the founding editor in chief of Questions Philosophy for Young People, which is a journal, along with having authored and co authored several books and articles about young people's philosophical thinking. Jana, welcome to this forum with us at the Circle Labs.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. I also want to welcome Rhea. Rhea is an MA in Childhood Studies from Rutgers University, and she holds interests spanning across doing philosophy with children, for children, and philosophy of children, teaching and researching and designing curriculum in philosophy and gender education with young people, as well as working with teachers to enable diverse progressive pedagogies. She's developed a philosophical curriculum and taught at a Jiddu Krishnamurti inspired space called Sholai School for 2 years and conducted P4C workshops in several other schools and libraries across India. She also writes an educational blog that you might want to check out that destabilizes hierarchy through creativity and collaboration. This blog is called Thinking Rhizomatically. We're going to post all the links of all the little things that we spoke about that capture all these learnings with you on the chat box soon. But with that, I'm going to welcome Rhea and Jana, who are going to, first engage in dialogue, just like share the idea of philosophizing with children with you all. And then eventually we're going to open up into some questions from the audience as well. So stay tuned. It's going to be a really fun ride. Over to you guys.
Arshia, thank you for that. Just give me 1 second. I'm trying to actually figure out how I can do my PowerPoint while also looking at Jana. So I'm sharing the screen and I'm actually wondering what you're being able to see. Can you just help me with that?
Yes, we can see your screen and we can see the slide.
Now, are you able to still see the entire slide?
Yes.
We are, Rhea, but you kind of made it much smaller and it's not really I mean, we just have a big black space around it. So I would go back to the way you had it initially.
Okay. Okay, is this okay?
It's the same.
There's still a black screen around?
You can zoom in the way it was.
There you go.
Yeah.
Is this working as well?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. I do want to say that I'm able to see my slides, but I can't see everyone, and I'm not able to see Jana right now, which is feeling a little strange. Just
It's okay. I'm here, so just it's fine.
Okay. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for being here today. I also want to say a big thank you to the Circle for bringing this opportunity and to Jigger for the slides. which I am finding a little troubling. But anyways, so thank you for being here today. And Jana has been my mentor since 2019 when I began this exciting journey. And we're here today to talk about philosophizing with children across contexts. So, what are we going to do? For the next 45 minutes, we will be in conversation about our journeys, what we mean by philosophy and philosophizing with children, why should we engage philosophically with children, and how does this look in our classrooms. Finally, we will end with some efforts to grow this movement. So, very quickly, I'm going to share a little bit about my journey in philosophy, as Arshia had also said a little bit about. This began when I was actually very young because I think I was notorious for asking many questions to the point that one of my teachers had to make a rule that I could only ask 3 questions per class. At this point, I remember when I was a child, I had wondered that what if we were assessed on the kinds of questions we ask and not just on the answers we give? My passion further grew in undergrad when I was introduced and drawn to philosophy. It was the first time I was engaging in life's bigger questions, learning about different perspectives in the field, and practicing ways to think. At this point, I had wondered how come we were not encouraged to think philosophically from a younger age? From there, I from there, I went to Sholai School, a small J. Krishnamurti inspired space in Palani Hills. They cater to children from different cultural and financial backgrounds. I worked with children from the ages 7 to 16 for 2 years, primarily in English. I first designed learning experiences from my own learnings at my undergrad and then slowly delved into the expansive literature available in this field. At that point, I remembered wondering why not do philosophy with children in languages besides English and outside of alternative settings? So I facilitated 6-week workshops at Vidyodaya in Gudalur and Selinghat in Assam. I worked closely with the teachers in these spaces to both facilitate in Tamil and Hindi. Interestingly, this was not either of these spaces' is first language. Both spaces cater to children marginalized by the mainstream schooling. At this point, I had wondered how can we grow research and curricular resources in philosophy with
Yeah,
children?
yeah,
Yeah,
just a second. Do you
yeah.
think you could turn your video on as well?
Oh, yes. I don't know why it's not on. I'm sorry.
No worries. And also, we're not able to see, if you're scrolling through your slides, we're not able to see the scroll initially. Now we can, but initially it was stuck on the first slide. Yeah?
Okay, can you see my video now?
Yes, yes.
Uh, okay, and you can also see my slides now clearly?
Yes, you are at the My Wanderings slide.
Yes. Is it big enough?
It works for now, as long as it is scrolling.
Okay, so this is working now?
I mean, could you scroll to the next one?
Yeah, it's the next one. It's with Jana's face on it.
No, we are on My Wanderings.
Okay, so we have to exit this. I'm sorry about this. I know that there should.
Do you want to present your slide? On the top, you will have that link. Yeah, right. If you go to um, right above insert.
No, you mean on Zoom, right?
Just present your slide.
Okay.
Just slideshow.
Yeah, it's on slideshow.
Okay.
We can't see it now. You you can't see it moving, right?
No. Why don't you continue? I'm going to drop your DM as well. Perhaps you can share this PPT separately with us, and we will share the screen. Yeah, till then you can continue.
Okay. Thank you. So one second.
Sorry,
If I yeah,
technical.
if I'm moving the screen now, you can't see, right? Like that is
Now we can see. Yes. Now
okay.
we're done. Yeah. You can
Okay.
continue now. Why don't you go ahead? This works.
Okay. Thank you. Jana, is this okay?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay. Okay, so now I'm going to so I enrolled in the childhood studies program to contribute towards the practice of philosophy with children in India. Now, I would like to stop here and pass it on to Jana and ask her about her wonderings in so many years of doing philosophy with children and the ways in which it's molded your journey, Jana. And after you share a little bit about your wonderings and your journey, I would love if we can start with a story that you would like to share about doing philosophy with children. I have read, seen, but not heard, and I know that there's so many stories of you doing philosophy with children in the book, and maybe you can share one of those over here now to begin with.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm happy to be here. I guess I'll start, Rhea, in response to your two questions with the first one, and just say that what really led me to doing philosophy with children was my own children. When I was working on my PhD in philosophy, my oldest son was 4, and he was starting to ask the questions that young children ask. You know, why is there hate in the world? Are numbers real? And I thought, this is really interesting that he's asking questions that are philosophical, because I'd never really thought of children as philosophical. And then I started to think about, as Rhea mentioned for herself, my own childhood and all the questions I had as a child. I was fortunate to be in a family where those questions were taken up by my father, and he was interested in talking with me about these questions. And I began thinking about how important that was to me in ways I hadn't really even understood as a child. And that being able to trust my own thinking and have my questions treated with seriousness was really empowering. So I began thinking about this as a way to work with children, I wasn't that interested in being just an academic. I really wanted to do something that had more sort of social impact than being a tenure track professor. So, and as for a story, yes, I do have lots of stories. One story that I was thinking about when you told me you were going to ask me this question is there was a conversation that I had with a group of students a few years back that was about the nature of home. I think we read a story and one of the children raised the question, well, what is a home? And we started to talk about it. And then one of the students in the class said, I don't know what the point of this is. I mean, you could look this up in the dictionary and it would give you a definition, but everybody has a different idea of home. And we're never going to decide on one thing that makes a home. So what's the point? And I sort of said, well, don't you think it's interesting to understand a concept we all use? And he was kind of like, yeah, maybe. And anyway, the conversation went on and we started to talk about home and how people felt about home. And at the very end of it, the same student who'd questioned the value of the conversation raised his hand and he said, you know, I've changed my mind. I wondered why we were talking about this when we weren't ever going to be able to finally define home. But now I think that talking about what home is and how different people see it makes you think more about what a home should be. And that's why it's important. And so these students were 9 years old. And these are the kinds of sort of conversations and also developing thinking that I see all the time in philosophy classes with children.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that story, because I think in the few years of experience that I have had in doing philosophy with children, I think one of the most interesting thing that happens, and I'm going to share an example of something similar too, is that they, like, the class begins with like, I'm sure about this, and this is like, I don't see the point of this, as you said. And then over time you can see how their perspectives are evolving as you continue engaging with it. I think one of the things is that it's easy to just stop there and be like, okay, I guess there's no point in doing this, or like we've got to some perspectives and that's adequate. And I think for me as well, it's very relatable, because I do think that even if we've not reached any conceptual clarity or in certain classes, we've still made progress with but I changed my mind. And I think that has been a very relatable experience.
Yeah, both
Um,
I've changed my mind and also, oh, I don't understand this as well as I thought I did. I thought I just knew what a home was. And now I realize actually there's a lot to think about here. And so it really pushes children to think about the assumptions they're making, which is, of course, something we can all, that's helpful to everyone.
Correct. I'm going to now share with you, Jana, as well as everyone attending, a similar example, except I'm going to take a little longer to share this example because it's going to be a little bit in Hindi and then I've transcribed it in English to kind of walk through what's happening. And at this point, Jana, I do want you to also step in and like give your insights on how these children have spoken about this and if there's something that I've also missed in how I've tracked their perspectives. So the example I would like to share today took place actually last week at a school in Palghar district in Maharashtra. There were around 15 students and they were from 4th grade to 8th grade. The stimulus that I'm going to share today was actually passed on by one of the professors from Azim Premji University. So credit for the stimulus to him. And my Jigar, my partner, was the main facilitator of this session. Okay, now I'm going to ask you, are you able to see the screen clearly or are able to read it? Okay, that's good. So this is just the brief of the longer story we shared last week. So once, I'm going to read it out loud. Once they lived a family in a village in Maharashtra. The village was remote and did not have many shops. The children of the family, Chutki, Raju, and Bheem, were fond of chocolates but rarely had the opportunity to eat them as they were not readily available in the village. They usually received chocolates when their parents went to the city, and today is one such occasion. Their parents left them and said that they would promise to get chocolates if they did all the chores around the house. There was a lot to be done. Soon after, Beam went off to sleep. Chutki and Raju were annoyed but continued working. Then Raju's friend came and called him to play cricket, and he was off too. Chutki was left alone to do the work. Beam woke up right in time for lunch and, realizing that Raju was missing, decided to go call him. Raju told Beam that he wasn't hungry and that Beam and Chutki can eat their lunch. After eating, Beam wanted to help but again went off to sleep. And so basically, Chutki finished all the work around the house and finally got to rest. When Chutki was resting, Raju returns hungrily. Raju gets upset that they did not leave him his share of food. Before he could argue, their parents returned with the chocolate and told them to divide it amongst themselves. Chutki here says that she should have the whole chocolate as she did all the work. Raju argues that he is starving and hence he needs the chocolate. And finally, Beam says that the chocolate should be split into 3 parts because that's what father said. Now here is the situation that we kind of shared with the students, and we asked them to come into this conversation thinking about what they would do, what they would say to help the situation that Chutki, Raju, and Beam are in. So this was actually a 50-minute long conversation, which we struggled to kind of cut into 6 minutes, which we are going to share now. And if we're interested, we can watch all 6 minutes, or we can just watch the first 2 minutes. And we're doing this here to give you a feeling. I think there's nothing like understanding philosophy with children than when you're in the classroom with children. So the idea of like hearing this voice recording together before we look at the transcript and I break it down and all of that stuff is to really get a feeling of what was happening in the classroom. And now I do have to ask Arshia, who has the voice recording, to be able to either be able to play it or share it, whichever is possible.
I can play it. I have it. I
Okay.
can play it.
Thank you.
You just have to stop sharing your screen for just a minute.
Yeah.
तीनों को मिलना चाहिए क्योंकि वो तीनों के मम्मी पापा जो थे उसने ऐसा नहीं बोला था जो काम नहीं करेगा उसको नहीं मिलेगी तीनों को मिलने चाहिए काय माहित काय करायचं की चुटकीने जास्त काम केलंय मग तिला जास्त द्यायचं एक पीस तिला जास्त द्यायचा राजेने थोडासा केलाय मग त्याला अर्धा पीस जास्त द्यायचा आणि मग भीमला थोडं कमी द्यायचं कारण त्याने अभ्यास
क्या हम सब इस जवाब के साथ ओके हैं?
हाँ
पक्का?
हाँ
अब मान लो तुम सब भीम हो, ओके? तुम अपने भाई बहनों में सबसे छोटे हो, ठीक है? और तुम जितने छोटे हो उतना ही तुम्हारा चॉकलेट का पीस भी छोटा है। तुम्हें कैसा लगेगा?
बुरा बुरा बुरा। तो उसके साथ
तुम क्या करोगे? क्या करोगे?
झगड़ा।
कभी कभार क्या हमें ऐसा लगता है कि अगर हमने कुछ काम किया है तो हमको उस काम का इनाम मिलना चाहिए?
क्या ये भी हो सकता है जो इनाम इनको मिलता है वो चॉकलेट नहीं है, क्योंकि उन्होंने पहले पहले बताया था कि यहाँ इनके गांव में चॉकलेट कम होता है और जब भी वो शहर जाते हैं वो चॉकलेट लेके आते हैं। तो मुझे भी लगता है क्योंकि चॉकलेट कभी कभी आता है, इसको
इनाम ना बनाया जाए।
हाँ, कुछ और
को मिलना चाहिए
ये, बट मुझे पता नहीं ये कारण अच्छा है कि नहीं, पता नहीं।
कभी कभी खाने में मिलते तो सब लोग को मिलना चाहिए।
करेक्ट, बस तुम्हारी बात बराबर है, लेकिन आज
एक को ज्यादा और एक को कम, ऐसा नहीं मिलना चाहिए। शेयरिंग
हाँ,
शेयरिंग इज केयरिंग।
शेयरिंग इज केयरिंग, ठीक है? तो अब मैं तुमको ये भी पूछूंगा, अगर जैसे मैंने तुम सबको भीम बनाया वैसे मैं अगर तुम सबको चुटकी बना दूं तो क्या तुमको ऐसा लगेगा कि नहीं
मैंने सब काम किया,
मैं काम भी सारा करूं, खेलूं भी नहीं, सोऊं भी नहीं और चॉकलेट भी मुझे उतनी ही मिले जितनी बाकी दोनों को?
ऐसा करना चाहिए कि कम खाने के सोचना और फिर चुटकी जाकर पूरे खा लेंगे। फ्रिज में रखने के बाद फिर रात को उठ के फिर खा लेंगे और सुबह उठकर उन दोनों को बताएगी कि चॉकलेट खा ली। वो क्या करेगी, मतलब वो कल ही चॉकलेट मिलेगी, पर भीम चुटकी ने सारा काम कर लिया, भीम ने और राजू ने थोड़ा सा ही किया है। तो राजू कल सारा काम करेगा, फिर भीम फिर भीम करेगा, आधा दिन वो कर लेंगे। फिर ऐसा करके फिर तीनों को भी मिलेंगे, तीनों को भी
मतलब
नहीं, उन तीनों की भी गलती। चुटकी ने सारा काम किया तो चुटकी ने भीम को बताना था कि तुम काम करो, राजू को भी बताना था कि तुम काम करो, और राजू को भी गलती है, उसे पता था कि काम बहुत है तभी वो खेलने गया और भीम तो सोने गया। नहीं तो ऐसा कर सकते, बड़ा चॉकलेट होगा ना, उसको मिक्सर में डाल के उसका मिल्कशेक बना के सब लोग थोड़ा।
Okay, so we will definitely share the 6 minute or the longer voice recording after this session. But the idea was to just get a feeling of how it sounds rather than just have the script. And now I'm going to share my screen again with the transcript version to kind of walk you through how philosophizing looks in the classroom before we even get into what philosophy is and why philosophy. Just give me 1 minute. Okay, are you able to see the screen now, Jana, completely? Okay, so I'm going to dive right in and talk a little bit about what happened in this conversation. And I'm also trying to tell you all what thinking was happening and why we took certain facilitation moves. So, as we started this conversation, one of the children, and I've kept it C1, C2, C3, but there was a lot more voices as you could hear. So first, one of the children was like, the parents never said that the chocolate is supposed to be shared only if three of us did the work together equally, and therefore the three of them should get an equal share. So this was already quite interesting and profound, because this was a minor detail in the story that the parents did not relate the chocolate to them equally dividing work. So already over here, the child who spoke up first was listening closely and giving their reasons. Immediately after that, another child said that Chutki has worked the most, her piece should be the biggest. And Raju should get the relatively smaller piece, and Bhim should get the smallest piece of chocolate. So here we can see that the child has, without even us being like facilitating, they've already brought in an alternative perspective with their reasoning. So what the facilitator did at this point was bring in more voices and move towards not just critical thinking but collaborative thinking. Jigar asked, does everyone agree with this approach? And the children, most of them landed up saying yes, it should be split unequally. So now what we did is, as they were trying to reach a consensus, as a facilitator, we said, let's consider the implications of the decision. So here we slowly tried to move towards caring thinking. So we asked, consider yourself to be Beam. How would you feel about the proposed distribution? So this is just, yeah. And then one of the children responded saying, I would be very upset and would want to fight. So again, we were back to square one of like, okay, should we split it equally? Should we not split it equally? And we also realized that what they were at tussle with is that they empathized with Bhim, but also were making a relationship between chocolate being the reward for their work. So we took up this reasoning and probed a little bit into it by asking, do we feel that we should be rewarded for our efforts? And all of the children said yes at this point. So here, instead of taking each of their responses and trying to counter it, what we did is we accepted. So as facilitators, we said that, okay, they believe in rewards. So what can we do? They're in a tussle, we can provide an alternative solution. So we asked, in this case, can we consider that the chocolate is not the reward because it's not easily available? So we brought in something that they had missed in the detail, which is that chocolate was not easily available in their village around. And here the child said, agreed, and said that since it's not easily available, it should be shared equally between all of them. And then they started this sharing is caring that they've heard. And this was, again, they changed their perspective at this point and they adopted a new line of reasoning. And here again, we thought that, okay, now that they've moved back to that we should all share it, let's look at the implications for Chutki. And again, we brought in caring thinking. So if we're thinking about equally, what do you think Chutki would feel given that she did all the work, did not play or sleep? So here, I think someone needs to mute themselves. Okay, thank you. So then what happened was, again, we thought about Chutki and said, what would be the implications of Chutki? And here is where there's a set of like 4 different alternatives that came into the picture, given that we tried to make them think about Chutki's perspective as well as Beam's perspective. So first one of them said, let's put off the decision of distribution. Meanwhile, Chutki can sneakily eat the bigger part of the chocolate at night, leaving a little bit for the other two, and blame the rat for having eaten most of it. So there's first alternative, which also embodied quite a lot of playful thinking. Another child said, yes, putting off the decision makes sense. After Raju and Beam have compensated by doing extra work the next day, the chocolate can be shared equally. Then another child said, no. They are responsible for this situation because they did not take accountability of their tasks. I mean, another way to transcribe this is that the child was basically saying that Chutki should have held these other two responsible without getting away with work. So what we see is that, and the final solution that was given at this point, which was a completely fresh idea, was that instead of eating the chocolate, let's just use it to make milkshake, which is another consideration which they reached, given that they were questioning some of the assumptions in the previous parts as well. And they were using imaginative thinking here, of like imagining that maybe there should not be any measurement. So now that they actually found creative solutions to the problem at hand, we could philosophize by moving one step deeper or further and ask, why is it important for the chocolate to be distributed equally to begin with? And here they started thinking about like different types of goods, as we will see. So one first the child said that it should be distributed because they all like it, and then the facilitator tried to probe this reasoning by being like, in your house, does everyone eat equal portions of food every day? So now they started looking for examples. And a child said, no, dad eats more than me. And then the facilitator asked, if this is the case, why do we feel that everything must be divided equally amongst us? And so used the example of the dad to probe deeper. And then a new perspective came about where a child said whatever is nice should definitely be divided equally. So now they were starting to offer reasons and creating a category of goods called nice.
We've lost Rhea for a moment there. You can wait for her to come back. Absolutely. Maybe till we get Rhea back, we could consider some thoughts or some questions that people are already beginning to have. Sherry, you mentioned super interesting. Could you want to kind of elaborate on what you mean? Like which aspect?
Um, yeah, sure. I mean, this is such a simple story, but still, even as child, you can think about different aspects. That was amazing. Like you don't think children to think so many different aspects of things around sharing, about who deserves what, So those things were very interesting. So yeah, those transcripts.
Yeah. Simple but nuanced at the same time. Absolutely. Yeah, and I think for me, what's interesting is the playful thinking.
True.
As well. And I think playful thinking aligned with the fact that that morality is like at this point still it's to be explored, but there is no
Exactly,
around it.
exactly. Yeah, there is this moral conundrum happening, and then you dig deeper, and then you're like, okay, maybe we want to find a way out. Yeah, that was interesting.
Yes, absolutely. Ria, are you back with us?
Arshia, just wanted to ask, how do we raise hands here? I really can't see the option in case we had a question in between.
No worries.
In
What you can do is,
reaction.
you do have questions, just put them down on the
Okay.
chat and then we'll come back to you.
Okay, makes sense. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. For example, Savita has already put down a question. And when you go to React, Amrita, at the bottom right beside share, you'll notice that there is a raised hand approach as well. Amazing. So I think what we can do is perhaps, Amrita, do you want to share your question? Maybe Jana can help us respond to that in the meanwhile.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, and maybe this is also for Rhea when she comes back, that I can see this question repeatedly coming to students, that what is the relevance of this? Why are we sitting and discussing? And I just want to know from a facilitator point of view, how do you keep this going on an ongoing basis? Or how do you keep this engagement up for like maybe an entire year's worth of curriculum? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, sure. It's kind of a two-part question. So in answer to the first part, I would say what's important about it is that these are, the kinds of ethical or other dilemmas that children face all the time. And so helping them to think carefully about whatever it is they're choosing is really important because often we can make decisions kind of impulsively without really understanding the implications of our choices. And kind of connected to that, just in general, learning to think critically and to ask the kinds of questions these children are asking, and to think about all the possibilities that a very simple, as Sherry pointed out, example engenders, is very freeing for children because they can start to think critically without there being this one right answer that is so often the case in school. Because in this dilemma, there isn't one right answer. There are lots of ways to think about it, right? And so being able to start to think both critically and imaginatively about these kinds of questions really deepens children's abilities to think well and to learn how to give reasons, to think about what their reasons are for whatever choice they might be making, etc. And in terms of keeping it up all year, I think, in my experience at least, coming into a classroom every week and bringing a story or a dilemma or a short film or whatever it is that we're using to inspire these kinds of conversations is very engaging to students. And I mean, my experience is I walk into a classroom and the children are like clapping, oh, it's philosophy today, you know? So it's really, I mean, I think they feel the freedom of it, that it's a space that's really their space to explore these questions, and nobody's waiting in the wings with this one right answer that they're just waiting for the children to give. So that's a little bit of a long answer to your question, but it's a really important question. And Rhea, I think you're back
Thank
now?
you. Makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Is Rhea back or no? I thought I'd seen her.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
The technical difficulties are no whole
No
different
worries.
level this
Yeah.
time. I'm so sorry.
No worries. We have a bunch of questions actually that we can continue to engage. Do you need a moment? Because we already have questions from Chitra, Nimisha, Sidraj, lots of them coming in.
Yeah, just
Rhea, while
so that
you're
I can.
working, Rhea, while you're
Yes.
working on your I can respond to some of the questions in the chat if you'd like.
Exactly.
Yes, please.
Rhea? Okay. So the first question I see about, was there a direction the facilitator was trying to take the children towards? I don't know, because I don't know what this facilitator had in mind, but I would say in general, no, that is not at all the way we approach these kinds of discussions. We really approach it with the idea that we have something to learn from the children's ideas and thoughts, because often children think about these things more imaginatively than we adults who already think we know a whole lot, and often jump to a conclusion without really thinking it through. So generally, we really want the children to think for themselves about these questions without pushing them in one direction or the other. Okay, so then
we have Siddharaj. He asks, how does a facilitator keep their personal bias out of this?
Yeah.
Or is it
Yeah, which is sort of related to the previous question. And I think, I mean, it can be, I mean, we're all human. We all have assumptions we make, but I think we try very hard not to at least explicitly say to the children, here's what I think, because we know that because children have been raised in the kinds of school systems that they have, that if the adult says, here's what I think, children will often think, oh, that's the right answer. And so we try very hard not to do that. But of course, we have biases, and even though we're very careful about this, there are times, I'm sure, where our own assumptions, our own predilections, are obvious to children. And, I don't know that there's much we can do about that other than to help the children to recognize that we're learners too, and that the fact that I think something doesn't make it more important than what one of the child's peers thinks. So that's something I think we work really hard at, and that is very important as part of building this, what we call community of philosophical inquiry. And then in answer to the conclusion, how are they conclusion? That's a really good question. And closure is really important in these, especially because we don't end up at the end, oh, here's what we should do with the chocolate. There's no one answer, right? So there's a number of ways to provide closure. One is to just kind of walk the children through how far we've come, all the things we've talked about and thought about, and how the discussion grew, because a discussion like this might grow then to think about, what does fairness mean in general? Or is it always important for things to be equal? When is it not important for things to be equal, etc.? Another is to do some kind of creative activity. Sometimes I use philosophy journals, or we do a poem together. We might say, you know, fairness is, and everybody writes a line or something like that. And so there's lots of ways to help the children both to feel like there's some way of ending the conversation, and also to have a sense of what they're doing, and to kind of look at it from the outside in a way. Ray, are you ready?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, and I'm sorry again for the distraction. I also decided to not again put up the table, and if everyone was being able to follow what was happening, there's just a little bit left of the transcript that I thought I can walk through. So yeah, where we were at was that we finally got the chance to go into the question of why do we feel that everything has to be divided equally? And that's where they were trying to, what we were noticing is that they were coming up with different criteria and types of goods that should or should not be divided equally. So they first said that whatever is nice should be divided equally. And then we said, here is where we dropped a hypothetical situation. And we said, like, let's keep the chocolate aside. Consider the following hypothetical, which is that a big bag filled with money was mysteriously left in the middle of your village. What will you do with this money? So here they said that it should not be based on who likes money more or who wants the money more, but they said distribute it based on the needs of the people. So again, they were creating a new category of goods, which is that they're need-based good and that should be distributed equally. So using the same reasoning, we tried to bring about consistent reasoning and asked them that if we are thinking about need based, then when Raju came about and said that I need this the most because I'm hungry, then why did we think that Raju should get the most amount of chocolate? And here they were actually going into a new trajectory of talking about how it should still be split equally amongst three of them, and the rest of it, one child said, should be shared with friends who have never eaten a chocolate before. So I just wanted to share all of this to kind of talk about how when we do philosophy with children, it's yes, they first come up with their different perspectives, but it's a slow movement towards looking at the implications, finding other alternatives, giving hypotheticals, and applying consistent thinking. So it's not that usually people are like, doesn't philosophy involve all of this and does it have to happen at once? But I think it's careful questioning, as I think Jana has said before in her books and her videos, it's like a skilled questioner that can actually go deeper and deeper into the kinds of questions that children are asking. Um, yeah, so I am looking at the time, and I was wondering, Jana, if for the rest of the time we can talk about some of the questions about why do philosophy with children. I think a lot of the times people want to see how it is and want to see what we mean by philosophy, but most importantly, given how busy the timetable is and all the other subjects that need to go into education, people often ask, why should we do? And I thought to give you some time to really talk about what's unique about philosophical inquiry.
So I did talk about that a little bit, Rhea, in response to a question when you were when you were having technical difficulties. And I'll just expand on it really briefly because I know you have other questions as well that you want to talk about. But I think the most important reason to do philosophy, is that, as someone pointed out at the very beginning, children are already thinking philosophically. And it's an area in which often their kind of pretty serious questions and ideas don't get taken up by adults. And so a child will ask a question that is really provocative and thoughtful, and often the adult response is to either kind of laugh at the child or talk about how adorable they are, or think that they can't really understand the implications of what they've asked. But as you've just heard, children are quite capable of thinking philosophically. And so giving them space to wonder with each other is really valuable. And as I think I said earlier, because philosophical questions, unlike most areas in the academy, don't have final settled answers. That's what makes them philosophical. It allows for a space where children can really think with a great more freedom about questions that matter to them without feeling the pressure of, there's going to be a right answer that they're going to have to get on the test, because philosophy is not like that.
And just adding to what you were saying, is that something that I have experienced in my time in the classroom when doing philosophy, is that it has felt as like a space of timelessness. And what I mean by that is that we get to explore ideas without being governed by predetermined answers to reach. The hope has always been for like young children to come up with new ways of thinking, which even us as adults have not thought about. And I think I experience this as timelessness, as we cannot know beforehand, like in this example, where our exploration will be at any given moment or by the end of the class time. I think this doesn't mean to say that we're not going somewhere, but I think usually like such spaces are not really part of classroom, unlike art or play, but because thinking is constantly measured in education. And I think that is something that philosophy with children is opens up. It opens up the idea for us to, as like educators, to not just guide children towards particular answers, which is always our fear. Like I think one of the biggest fears that I have had to deal with is to like come to terms with the fact that I might not be knowledgeable enough, or that this goal of like you have to be more and more knowledgeable enough is not really the most important priority when we're wandering together. It's about being able to listen to each other, add to each other's perspective, and rethink our um, ways of thinking as well. Um, and I would also ask you, Jana, that often in the Indian context, people wonder that when we are barely being able to cater to basic literacy and math education, why should we create such a space? And here I would like to ask you, because I know that a lot of the philosophy with children work also goes into pointing towards how it's not valuable or important to separate the two in this way. So would you like to say something over there about like why it takes a back seat and why it actually ties into something like literacy, education, or math?
Right. Well, I mean, there are lots of things to say about this. I guess I would just say first that one of the things that happens in these kinds of philosophical conversations is that children, and often especially children who are having trouble in other areas of school, are develop skill and confidence at expressing what they think. And once you start to believe that you have something important to say, that can spur you to be more motivated and engaged in other areas of school. I mean, I have teachers say to me all the time, this child, a child in the class who's been struggling, comes alive in philosophy. And now we're seeing that the child is more confident at working on his reading, or more confident at, asking questions in math. Because one of the things we really want kids to take from this is that questions are important. And that when you have a question, it doesn't mean that there's something you don't know that you should know. It means there's something to be curious about, and there's something you want to learn about. And so being able to ask good questions and have confidence in your questions, I don't know that there are more important skills actually for any area of learning than those.
I'm also wondering, Jana, whenever you think, I know that people can only stay till around 7:10. Do you think that given the number of questions, we should maybe just start facilitating the questions that people have at this point? Okay. And I'm wondering if Ashia is going to be doing that.
Yes, absolutely. So let's I mean, we had already, I think, in many ways just started that dialogue a little bit earlier. So let's look at some more questions that have come in. Um, And also, friends, now is a good time for you all to raise hands. If you have your questions coming in and bubbling in, we'd love for you to, ask you to unmute and share that as well. Let's begin with Abhineet to actually unmute yourself and ask this question. Oh, I think there might be some voice issues. No worries. I'll say this out loud. So Abhineet asks, is there a clear distinction between social philosophy and personal philosophy, particularly in how they could be shaped by tendencies towards conformity/individuality? This comes from the question, how might the responses of each differ in a private as against public setting? Yeah, great question.
Rhea, would
And
you like me to start?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think I'm not completely sure I understand the question, so I'll respond, and then if I'm not answering the question, maybe put something in the chat to let me know to clarify. But I think what the question is asking is, are there times where we will say something in a public philosophy conversation because of the peer pressure and because of the way the conversation's going that will actually be not consistent with what we would say in private to our closest friends or what we might think to ourselves. And I think this is a really valuable, important question, because I do think there are times where a child will, in the context of a discussion, say, oh, I think they should share the chocolate equally, and then go out at recess and say, well, I would think if I did all the work, I'd be entitled to the chocolate, but I wasn't going to say that in class. I think there are ways, so if that, okay, great, thank you. So I think there are ways to really avoid this. One is to be really open yourself about the way you might think about this problem and offer alternatives. For example, if everyone in the class is saying it should be shared equally because that's the right thing to do, you can say, well, I wonder though, if I had done all the work, I might not think it was a great idea to share it equally. I might feel as if I really deserved something for all the work I put in where, my siblings were sleeping or playing with their friends and I was busy doing chores. So you can kind of help to interject into the conversation. That's one of the roles of the facilitator, really, is to help to avoid the sort of everyone piles on and agrees with each other. Because I always say to the students, these aren't simple questions. So if everyone agrees, we're missing something, because there are lots of ways to think about this. So I hope that's helpful. And it looks like somebody has their hand up.
yeah, let's have Adil. Do you wanna get off mute and ask?
Yeah, sure. So I have tried this philosophizing with a different group of students, which was an higher secondary students, which around like 16 to 18 years old. So in the Indian context, what I have personally felt that by the time they grow like into late teens, they have developed this instinct that they like the new perspective. So they have this thing which they thinks this is right and this is wrong, so they are struggling to get the new fresh perspective. They might not have that thinking branch developed. So how it is important to have this philosophy at a very early age, so those kids like when they grow up, so they have very new perspective and they don't think in a very, let's say, in a block. They might go into very like, then they can see that all those questions can be subjective also.
Ray, I want to give you a chance in case you want to respond.
So I thought that you were saying that it was important to start earlier so that they don't get stuck in this way, but I didn't catch the question. Was there a question that you were
Okay,
trying
so
to?
how it is important to get this thing started on
Mhm.
like very early age, and if those kids who are into late teens, how we can help them to think about the new perspective. For them, it is like not subjective thinking. This is correct and this is incorrect. They are
Correct.
thinking in that pattern.
So if I understood right, that I think the what as Jana was saying before, I think it would imply that from a young age they do get these more and more opportunities to be in the classroom where they're engaging with the not just the open-ended questions that they have, but just general philosophical puzzles that are all the time in other subjects as well, but you don't really get to see them. So it's like even if you're doing history, democracy can be a puzzle. If you're doing math, the numbers can be a puzzle. So I think the deeper question is also how can we bring this philosophical education in all the other subjects as well, not just as a standalone subject where you have to think flexibly and learn different perspectives. And I think there are a lot of different ways in which educators in philosophy and philosophy of childhood, etc., talking about what are the different kinds of questions that you can bring to each of your subjects, if that's helpful. Yeah.
Thank you. So Amanda, you've raised your hand and I see that you had also asked a question in the chat box. Go ahead and mute yourself and you can ask, and then we'll move to the chat box.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing all of your thoughts, everybody. Something that I notice is parents and their children are kind of scared of the word philosophy. And the moment that I say, oh, I love doing philosophy with children, they're kind of like, oh, well, I'm not trying to get into that. So I've been recently just kind of posing it as an art class, and as they're making, kind of sneaking in some questions. How do you all go about that initial hesitation that people may experience?
It's such a great question, Amanda. And I mean, we've talked for years about whether we should just lose the word philosophy, but you know, I don't want to, because I think children are philosophical, and I want them to be able to own that and to enter this conversation that's been going on for so many thousands of years. But what I often will do when I'm working with parents or when I'm coming into a school is talk about big questions and not focus so much on philosophy until we're sort of already starting to get there. Because when you talk about big questions, parents get that. That's not scary. We all know children ask lots of questions. So that's often a way in my experience. The other way in is to focus on ethics, which is way less scary to people than philosophy and way less intimidating. And I will say, I mean, it's my discipline, but philosophers are largely to blame for this. And, you know, so I mean, that has been a real, and it continues to be a problem. But that notwithstanding, I don't think philosophers should be entitled to decide who does philosophy and what philosophy is. And I think children are part of our philosophical world and should be included. So that's kind of a complicated answer to your question. It's a really good question, though.
So in the spaces that I have been in and around India, the thing that I feel has worked really well is that there's a whole movement trying to get away from rote-based learning. And you know, if anything, educators are constantly talking about not having children being passive recipients. And you know, there's the banking system of learning is, you know, in everyone's, I mean, not everyone's, but it's quite out there as something that's happening. So I think one of the entry points that I've been is that even if not use philosophy, but use this as a way of being able to come together to construct thinking together, to not just receive information, but be able to imagine new ways of thinking. Imagine within these disciplines, if I was to like not just receive photosynthesis as a process, but think as though the first scientists would have thought and wondered how do plants get their food. If I can do that, then I'm actually nurturing children to be able to wonder and create knowledge rather than just receive knowledge. So I think that has been something that people have been very responsive to, that to not just look at children as passive recipients.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. So we are at 7:05. I think there's a few questions. One question that Jana, maybe you can decide because you had said that we will talk about this a bit. Do you feel like you've talked about that question a bit? The question being from Yogeshwari and Amrita around the role of the facilitator, in terms of flow of session, topic of session, and so on. Any specific training, etc.
Yes, there is definitely specific training that is necessary, and Rhea can talk about this a little bit as well. And I also want to introduce Debbie Talakdar, who is our program director at PLATO and who also works a lot with educators and about how to learn how to do philosophy with children. Because there is, even though you don't have to have a PhD in philosophy in order to bring philosophy into your classroom, you do need to be able to kind of hear the philosophical in what the children are saying and to learn how to ask the right questions that are going to help develop the conversation but not try and control it. There's a real art to it, and when I work with students, graduate and undergraduate students, they'll often come and watch me and they're like, oh, it looks so easy. And then, they have a chance to try it and they're like, oh, this is a lot harder than I thought. So it is both learning about philosophy and how to recognize philosophical questions and ideas, but also how to facilitate a discussion where you're not trying to steer it in a particular direction, which for many educators is very challenging because it's very antithetical to the way we've been trained. So and PLATO offers, you can look at our website. We offer lots of resources. We have an online professional development course that we run. We also have lots of free events that we do and resources on the website. And, feel free to reach out to me. I'm always happy to be available to people as a resource. And Rhea, I don't know if you've been in our courses, so I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, I did want to say that a lot of my efforts in philosophy with children are in its growing phase. And so having Plato and having the courses in Plato has been like where I have learned a lot of the training that I have received. Having said that, if there are people who have attended today who would like to be involved in the advancement of philosophy with children, we are not yet, we don't offer our own trainings as of now, but hopefully we can soon. I would say definitely reach out to me or Jana, or as Jana will introduce Debbie, to be able to really take it to schools, be part of like the curriculum work, be part of research in philosophy or childhood. We're trying to create more opportunities in this field. So yeah, please do reach out in that area. And I think Jana, you can go ahead and introduce Debbie as well.
I think I already did.
Oh, okay, fine.
Debbie, if you want to say anything, please.
Hi, everyone. This has been a great conversation, and just here as a resource, I've worked with Jana for 11 years now, and been working with Rhea more recently. We have lots of resources for everybody at Plato, so please reach out. And because I also grew up in India, I feel very much what Rhea has been talking about in terms of like some of the unique challenges of doing this work in India and bringing it more to the mainstream. And that's something I'm very interested in and working on. So stay tuned.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that, Debbie. So friends, we have one more question that we're going to address, and post that I would love to hear from all three of you about how everybody who's in this call can pursue this and go further, whether in terms of resources or connections. But before that, can I just invite Suhani to share a quick poll before we move on to the final question and resource sharing?
Yes, I'll just be launching a very quick poll. You'll see it on your screen right away. Just take just a couple of minutes to fill it in and we can continue. Thank you so much. All right, you should be able to see it on the screen.
Thanks. We have 12, 15 responses in. We're going to close it at about 50 responses, and we're going to end with our question and resource sharing. Amazing. All right, we're gonna pause in another 10 seconds. So let's hope everybody's in. I'm gonna hear all your voices.
While
Okay.
people are filling this out, can I just really quickly say for folks who are interested in learning more about this, to check out some of our workshops and webinars and roundtables and other offerings at PLATO. They're all free and open to the public. Please come and kind of get a sense of what doing philosophy entails. And if you're interested, sign up for our introductory workshops and our 10-week course. So there's lots of ways to get involved and even get started that are, resources that we freely offer to the public. So look at our website, check it out, and ask us any questions if you have any.
Amazing. Thank you so much. So, honey, I think we can end the poll now. All right.
So much.
Lovely. So with that, I think there is one question as well. I mean, you're already getting requests to come on in, but the question that was left was Kamakshi's question around language. And I think it's a very, very pertinent question in case we haven't already addressed it, which was what is the role of language in the facilitation process? What are some ways of disempowering the focus on language?
So yeah, I would answer that by saying that I have faced, of course, in going to different schools around India, that I don't think language is trivial at all, and I do think to be able to think about our thinking, it plays a big role. And I think developing philosophy with children in India would necessarily mean that we work together in advancing resources that are available in different languages as well, because I don't think we can, I don't think we can separate listening, thinking, communicating, and language from one another. And given that philosophy with children is so centered around listening and communicating, um, yeah, just if you, we should all be together in this to advance it in different languages as well.
Hmm. So what I'm hearing is maybe one to go at the very least bilingual, if not go to a local language, because that can go deeper with with where you can go mentally, since it comes naturally and since it mimics how the brain, how the mind's working. And the other thing I'm hearing is at the same time continuing to enrich both mother tongue as well as second language, because I feel like the more you enrich that, the more you can kind of capture um, complex ideas and thoughts, which absolutely exist, but like clouds, right, in our heads. So absolutely, I think there's a very pertinent question when it comes to especially the Indian context around language and how we shouldn't limit it to any specific language as well. Yeah. So with that, I think we are coming to an end of our questions. I think one, Debbie has already shared some thoughts. Some people have also asked for a mailing list. Rhea, Jana, do you want to add any more ways in which people can continue their exploration into philosophy with children?
I would just say do check out the website. I mean, there's lots, and there's links to other places that have great resources as well. And so we really try to have everything be very complete and accessible. And you have our emails. You can reach out to Debbie or to me at any point.
Yeah, I know Rhea's doing a workshop in Bangalore, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, so there is an in-person workshop on 11th and 12th in Bangalore. So I put my email here, which is kuthoore@gmail.com, and I can definitely send you more details about that one.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. All right. So we have your email IDs. Thank you so much, Jana. Thank you so much, Rhea, for joining us. And thank you so much, Debbie, also for being a part of it. Everybody else for engaging, as well as answering, asking some wonderful questions that moved me as well. I hope we can go deeper into philosophizing with children, and see more of that come out with some of our own educators and entrepreneurs in the circle. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise. Look forward to more collaborations in the future. Appreciate that.
Thank you. And I'm sorry for all the technical difficulties.
No worries about it. It's part and parcel.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. Bye.
Bye.